Welcome to Revenge with Luna. I saved for 6 years to buy my first home. My sister found out 3 days after closing. By the time I pulled into the driveway, her car was already parked inside my garage. That's when I called the police. My name is Aubrey Weston. Wait, no. Let me start over, because if I don't tell you this in the right order, you won't understand how close I came to just handing it all over and pretending it was fine. I'm 31. I work in medical billing, which sounds boring until you realize it means I understand exactly how money moves, how debt accumulates, and how to document everything in a way that holds up under scrutiny. That skill saved me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building called Harrington Place, on the east side of the city near the park. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room. Original hardwood. A kitchen with actual counter space. I had walked past that building every single morning for 4 years on my way to the train, and every single morning I told myself, someday. I'd stop at the window of the leasing office and look at the floor plan taped to the glass. Studio. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I memorized the layout of the 2-bedroom before I ever set foot inside. Someday became a plan the year I turned 28. I opened a separate savings account that my sister didn't know about, that my mother didn't know about, that nobody in my family knew about, and I deposited money into it every single paycheck without exception. I didn't go on vacation. I didn't buy a new car when mine started making that noise. I packed my lunch every day for 3 years. I said no to weekend trips, to birthday dinners at nice restaurants, to basically anything that cost money I hadn't already budgeted. My coworker thought I was cheap. I let her think that. I didn't tell anyone in my family what I was doing, because I already knew what would happen if I did. My sister has a way of making other people's good news about her own pain. Every time something good happened to me growing up, she found a reason why it was actually unfair to her. When I got a scholarship for college, she cried for 2 days because she hadn't gotten one. When I got promoted at my job, she called my mother and said she felt like the family didn't celebrate her enough. I love her. I do. But I learned a long time ago that the only way to protect something I cared about was to keep it quiet until it was already done. So I kept it quiet. For 6 years, I kept it so quiet that when I finally signed the closing documents on a Tuesday afternoon in October, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the title company and cried alone because there was no one I could call. I gave myself 3 days before telling anyone. 3 days to get the keys, walk through my empty apartment, stand in the kitchen, and just breathe. I wanted one moment that was fully mine before it became a family event. I didn't get it. I got 2 days. 2 days before my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Faraday, who had lived on the 4th floor since the building opened, knocked on my door with a look on her face that I didn't understand at first. "I think there might be some confusion," she said carefully. "There are people in your apartment. I saw them moving things in yesterday, and I thought maybe you'd hired movers. But then I noticed the man had a key, and the woman was directing him, and I just wanted to make sure you knew." I stared at her. "What did the woman look like?" I asked. She described my sister exactly, down to the leather jacket. I didn't drive over in a panic. That's what surprises people when I tell this story. I sat down on the edge of my bed in my old rental, and I opened the app for my security system. I'd had it installed the same week I got the keys, because I'd seen enough stories online to know better. And I pulled up the camera feed. There she was, my sister, standing in the middle of my living room, gesturing with her hands like she was describing something to the man she'd been dating for 8 months. She was pointing at the window wall, the one that looks out over the park. And she was smiling in this particular way she has when she's really pleased with herself. He was nodding. There were boxes. Not my boxes. Her boxes, with her handwriting on the side in black marker. I watched for almost 10 minutes. I watched her open my kitchen cabinets and close them again, assessing. I watched her walk down the hall and push open the door to the 2nd bedroom and stand there with her hand on the frame. I called my mother first, not to ask for help, but because I needed to understand how much my family already knew. She picked up on the 2nd ring. "Did you know about this?" I asked, without saying hello. A pause, just half a second too long. Aubrey, your sister is in a really difficult situation right now. Her lease ends next month, and Garrett, that was the boyfriend. They don't have anywhere to go. And I thought, you thought what exactly? I thought the apartment was big enough. You have 2 bedrooms. You're not even moved in yet. Mom. It would just be temporary. I hung up. I want to be clear about something. I was not surprised. I wish I had been. Surprise would have meant I had expected better from them. But I'd been in this family for 31 years, and I knew exactly what temporary meant. It meant indefinite. It meant until I said something. And then it meant I was being selfish. It meant until my sister found her footing, which would take as long as she decided it needed to take. And in the meantime, my apartment, my deed, my mortgage, my 6 years of packed lunches and skipped vacations would just be a resource they were borrowing. I opened the security app again. I hit record on all 4 cameras. Then I called the police. The dispatcher was calm and professional, the way they're trained to be. She asked me to describe the situation, and I described it exactly. I am the owner of an apartment at this address. There are people inside without my permission who have no legal right to be there, and I have camera footage showing them entering with a key they obtained without my authorization. Do you know the individuals? She asked. Yes, I said. One of them is my sister. There was a brief pause, the kind where you can feel someone recalibrating. We'll send someone over, she said. I got there before the officers did. I sat in my car in the garage, watching the camera feed on my phone, hands steadier than I expected them to be. On the screen, I watched my sister open a bottle of wine she'd brought, and pour 2 glasses and hand one to the boyfriend. She clinked her glass against his and said something I couldn't hear. He laughed. She laughed. They were toasting in my apartment with wine. Before I had ever even cooked a meal in that kitchen. The officers arrived 7 minutes later. I watched on camera as the building intercom buzzed and my sister's expression shifted. She set down her wine glass. She straightened her jacket. She walked to the intercom with her chin up, the way she does when she's decided she's going to be charming. And she buzzed them in. By the time I got upstairs, the 2 officers were standing in my doorway and my sister was talking very quickly about a family arrangement and how she was just helping her sister get settled. She hadn't seen me yet. I came up behind the officers and she looked past their shoulders and her face did something I had never seen it do before. It went completely blank. Not guilty, not scared. Just blank, like she was quickly calculating. This is my apartment, I said. I bought it. I have the deed, the mortgage documents, the closing statement, every wire transfer from my account. She does not live here. She was not given permission to be here. My sister's face came back to life. Aubrey, can we talk about this privately? This doesn't need to be. I have it on camera, I said. The whole thing. That was when the blank look came back. One of the officers asked to see the documentation. I had it in a folder I'd grabbed on my way out, because I'm the kind of person who keeps her documents organized, and in one place, because I work in medical billing, and I know what happens when you can't produce a document when you need one. He flipped through it, compared the name on the deed to the name on my ID, and turned back to my sister. Ma'am, unless you have documentation establishing your right to be in this unit, you'll need to leave. My sister looked at me over the officer's shoulder. It wasn't a look of remorse. It was a look that said this isn't over. Fine, she said, in the voice she uses when she's decided that conceding gracefully is her best strategic option. Fine, I'll go. She collected her things. The boyfriend, to his credit, I think, had the presence of mind to look embarrassed. He didn't say anything to me. He kept his eyes down and carried the boxes out. My sister took the wine. She stopped in the doorway on her way out. You know this makes you look terrible, she said quietly, so the officers wouldn't hear. The cameras caught everything, I said. Every minute you were in here without permission, including the part where you toasted with someone else's wine in someone else's apartment. She left. I stood in the middle of my living room alone and listened to the silence. If I thought that was the end of it, I would not be telling you this story. My phone started before I even made it back downstairs. My mother first. Then an aunt on my mother's side who lives 3 states away and somehow already knew. then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a year. The calls were variations on a theme. How could you? In front of strangers. She's your family. She needed help. Do you know how this looks? My sister had sent a message to our extended family group chat. I didn't see it until later that night, but I can describe it from memory because I read it approximately 40 times. She'd written that she had been trying to help me settle into my new place, as if she'd been doing me a favor by moving her boxes into my bedroom closet, and that I had chosen to involve law enforcement in a private family matter rather than having a conversation. She did not mention that she had entered the apartment without asking me. She did not mention the key. That was the part I couldn't let go of. The key. I had not given my sister a key. I had not given anyone in my family a key. The only keys in existence were the two I'd received from the property manager at closing, both of which were in my possession. I'd checked. So, how had she gotten in? I filed a police report that night, specifically for the unauthorized key. The officer who helped me was patient and took notes and explained my options clearly, which I appreciated. He also explained that a civil locksmith complaint might be my fastest route to understanding what had happened, since the building's locksmith records might show whether a copy had been made. It took me 11 days to get the answer. A locksmith 3 blocks from the building had made a copy of a key that matched my unit number. The person who'd requested it had claimed to be the owner. He had not verified ownership. The date was 4 days after my closing, which meant someone had been watching the building's public records. Because property transactions are public, and someone had known the unit number and moved fast. That someone was my sister. I know because she told me herself, eventually, in a conversation I recorded on my phone. She came to my office. This was 2 weeks after the apartment incident, and I had already filed for a locksmith fraud complaint, and changed my locks twice, and added a deadbolt that required a code. She walked into the lobby of my building and asked the receptionist to let me know she was there, and I went down to meet her in the conference room because I was not going to have this conversation at my desk. With my coworkers 10 feet away, she sat down and crossed her arms and looked at me the way she's looked at me since we were children, like I am a problem. She is perpetually in the process of solving. You have to understand the position you've put me in, she said. I'd like to understand how you got a key to my apartment, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Property records are public, she said finally. I looked it up the same week you closed. I saw the unit number, and I figured. You figured what? I figured you weren't going to offer. She said it without any apparent embarrassment. Just matter of fact. You've always been like that. You get something good, and you hold it close, and you don't think about other people. I have a lease, ending in 3 weeks. I needed somewhere to go. You have 2 bedrooms that you obtained access to by fraud, I said. I'm your sister. Ah, that doesn't give you the right to my property. She leaned forward. If you press this, it's going to tear the family apart. Mom's already upset. Our aunt is upset. People are picking sides, and it's not going to go the way you think. I slid my phone slightly to the left on the table, so the microphone faced her more directly. I didn't create the situations, I said. You committed fraud to get a key to my apartment, and you moved your things in without my knowledge or permission. I'm not the one who tore anything apart. So, you're just going to let a technicality. It's not a technicality. It's called breaking and entering. And I have the locksmith records and the camera footage and a police report that documents all of it. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said, very carefully, what do you want? I want you to sign a statement acknowledging that you entered the property without my permission and that you obtained the key fraudulently. She laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that means she's deciding whether to take me seriously. And if I don't? Then I take everything I have to the district attorney's office. She stopped laughing. She didn't sign anything that day. She stood up and gathered her bag and told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life and walked out. I sat in the empty conference room for a while afterward, looking at my hands. They weren't shaking. I noticed that. They weren't shaking at all. My mother called that evening and I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was 11 minutes long. I listened to the whole thing. I took notes. She said a lot of things she probably believed were true, things about family and sacrifice, and how I had never understood what my sister had been through. And somewhere in the middle, she said, and this is the part I wrote down. You bought that apartment with money you never would have had if your father and I hadn't supported you all those years. My parents had not given me money toward the apartment. They had not co-signed. They had not contributed to the down payment. What they had given me, years ago, was 2 months of free rent in their house after I finished college while I got my first job, which I had always been grateful for and which I had paid back in the form of groceries and utilities and cash when they needed it. I had a spreadsheet. I keep records of things. It's what I do. I called an attorney the next morning. She was a real estate attorney who also handled fraud cases, and she had a voice like someone who had heard every version of every family dispute involving property and was never surprised by any of it. I told her the whole story. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "You have unusually strong paper trail." "I work in medical billing," I said. "That explains it," she said. "Here's what we're going to do." What we did was file a formal complaint with the city for the fraudulent key duplication, send a cease and desist to my sister, and draft a letter to my mother's attorney. She didn't have one, but the letter made clear I was prepared to establish that my parents had no financial claim on the property, with documentation. The cease and desist arrived at my sister's temporary sublet on a Thursday. I know it arrived because I had it sent certified mail and I tracked it. I also know that within 2 hours of its arrival, my phone lit up with 12 texts from family members I barely knew, all of whom had clearly been briefed by my sister. I saved everyone. My sister called me that night from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I picked up. "You hired a lawyer," she said. "I did. Over a key, over unauthorized access to my property obtained through fraud," I said. "Yes, silence. The family is never going to forgive you for this," she said. Her voice was different now. Not charming, not calculating, tired. For the first time, she sounded like a person instead of a strategy. "I know," I said. And I did know. I had known it before I filed anything. I had accepted it somewhere around the time I watched her toast with wine in my living room and understood that she had never once considered that I might mind. "I needed help," she said. "I just needed somewhere to go." "You could have asked me," I said, and I meant it. "That's all. You could have called me and said, 'I'm in trouble, my lease is ending. Is there any chance?' And I would have thought about it. Maybe I would have said no. Maybe I would have said, 'Let's figure something out.' But you didn't ask. You made the decision for me." Another silence. "I didn't think you'd say yes," she said finally. That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years. Probably because it was true. The complaint was resolved 6 weeks later. My sister signed a statement. Not the one I'd originally asked for, a version negotiated by my attorney that was slightly less explicit, but still on record. And the locksmith was fined and required to complete additional verification training. No criminal charges were filed, which my attorney explained was common in first offense civil fraud cases, and which I accepted because I understood the system well enough to know that the paper trail I had built was worth more than a charge that might not stick. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 months. My aunt removed me from the family group chat. A cousin I had been close with as a kid sent me a message that said she thought I had handled it wrong, and I wrote back a single paragraph explaining the timeline and the evidence, and left it at that. She didn't respond. My sister found a new apartment. She didn't tell me where. I moved into Harrington Place on a cold Saturday in January. I carried boxes up myself with one friend who'd borrowed a truck, and we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the kitchen because I didn't have a table yet, and I looked out the window at the park and the bare winter trees and the gray sky, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Solid. Like the ground under my feet was actually ground. My mother reached out first, 3 months after the resolution. A short email, not quite an apology. More of an opening. She said she wanted to have coffee and that she had been thinking about what I'd said about asking, versus assuming. I read it twice, set it aside, and read it again the next morning. Then I wrote back and said yes. We met at a diner near her house. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her, and I think I probably did too. She ordered black coffee and I ordered tea, and we talked around it for a while before she finally said. I didn't think about what she actually did. I was so focused on her being in trouble that I didn't think about what she actually did. I know, I said. I'm sorry. It wasn't everything I would have wanted her to say, but it was real. I could tell it was real because she looked uncomfortable saying it, and she's not a woman who is often uncomfortable. I drove home after that and parked in my garage. My parking spot with my name on the placard because I pay for it every month, and sat in the car for a minute before going up the stairs. My sister hadn't called. I didn't expect her to. Maybe she would someday. Maybe she wouldn't. I unlocked my door and stepped into my apartment, and the afternoon light was coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and hitting the hardwood in long gold rectangles, the way it does in October and January when the sun is low. I had plants on the windowsill now, a small table in the kitchen, a rug I'd spent 2 weeks deciding on. It looked like a home. I had walked past this building for 4 years on my way to the train. I had looked at the floor plan in the leasing office window and said, someday. I had packed my lunch and skipped the vacations and kept the savings account a secret and said someday so many times the word had almost stopped meaning anything. I stood in my living room in the afternoon light and I thought about all of it. The 6 years. The Tuesday afternoon in the title company parking lot. When I cried alone because there was no one to call, the camera feed, the wine glasses, my mother's 11-minute voicemail. The attorney's voice, steady and unsurprised, all of it had brought me here, to this floor, this light, this door with my key in the lock. They could call me difficult. They could call me unforgiving. They could say I chose a building over a sister, a deed over a family. Let them say it. I had the records and the receipts and 6 years of evidence that this was mine, built from nothing, held by no one but me. The key rests on a hook by the door now, same spot every time, so I never have to search for it. A small thing. An ordinary thing. But every time I hang it up, I feel it the same way I felt it that first night I slept here, when the apartment was still empty, and the city hummed outside the windows, and I lay on an air mattress on my own floor and thought, this is mine. Nobody is taking it from me again.